This tells me that the company does not treat people very well going out, and that is a great indicator of how they're going to treat you when you walk in the door. Hello and welcome back to my channel where I help you slay your career and cultivate the successful life you deserve. Today we're talking about Glassdoor reviews, and this is something that has come up with several of my clients and I've had a few conversations with you guys about. I've heard this story a few too many times.
Their Glassdoor reviews were awesome, but then I got in and they were toxic AF.
So let's talk about Glassdoor reviews, how you should use them in your job search, how you should actually evaluate them to see if they're valid or not, and what resource you should really use so that you can get an understanding of what it's really like working at that company before you sign the dotted line. If that sounds good to you, tap that like button and let's get into it. First thing I need to speak to is that not every company upholds Glassdoor's terms of service. Now, in their policies, it is very explicit. You cannot incentivize an employee to write a review on your behalf. And I do think that that is something that is important to Glassdoor. And similarly, I do think that Glassdoor does the best that it can to protect its reviewers who are giving authentic reviews. But I have heard way too many stories, especially about startups that care way more about their Glassdoor reviews than the experience that they give their teams in real life. And these are the companies that you need to be critical of. Knowing that not every single review is going to be organic and authentic, let's get into how you can actually evaluate if these reviews are reliable. The first thing to look at when you're looking at Glassdoor reviews as you consider a potential employer is the number of reviews that they have. Obviously, big companies are going to have a lot, and because you have more data, you are going to have a higher level of data validity. It's not to say that everything is organic and everything is authentic, but these companies tend to get a lot of reviews without solicitation, and because there is just a mass number, their ratings actually make more sense. On the other side of the coin though, when you have a smaller company with a low number of reviews or a small company with a high number of reviews, this is where I want you to start to be a little bit more critical. Think about review behavior. Most people are going to write a review when they have an extraordinarily exceptional experience or when they have an incredibly terrible experience that they don't want you to have. Glassdoor does incent you to give reviews by doing things like gating the amount of content that you can see without an active account, though there are ways around that. I do want you to take into consideration that for small to mid-sized companies, there probably will not be a statistically significant amount of data. However, when you do look at the number of reviews in proportion to the number of employees, this can be an indicator if they have been incenting their staff to give positive reviews. The next thing that you should look at when you're looking at Glassdoor reviews is to see what comes up consistently. Qualitatively go in and read the reviews and see what is coming up again and again. This is going to give you an idea of both the things that are very good at the company as well as the things that are very bad. And don't just read the positive reviews or the negative reviews. Look through all of them and find what is consistently coming up. More often than not, when there are more than a few reviews, you are going to see similarities that are actually cropping up. This isn't to say that they're not authentic. I actually take this more as a positive indicator that people are having a consistent experience. And really, it is the substance of what they're saying that is much more important. For example, one of the things that is pretty much a cliche in the startup life is to say that it's not your standard 9-to-5 schedule and that you have to work really hard, but really, that's a pro. It's such a benefit for you to work all the time. Get me right on that lack of work-life balance. But you will see where people are framing that in both a positive way and in a negative way on Glassdoor. Now, truly, this could be a good thing or a bad thing for different people at different stages in their life and career, but it is something, if you are paying attention to things like that, that you would want to watch for. Another thing that you can do when you're doing your qualitative review and reading through the reviews on Glassdoor is to really start reading in between the lines. Look for the things that aren't being said. And this is true again for positive as well as for negative reviews. Drawing from my last example, the real thing that is being said, whether it's framed as a good thing or a bad thing, is that there is going to be a high number of hours that is going to be demanded from you. Whether that's something that you're looking for or not is entirely up to you. But can you actually trust Glassdoor reviews, especially when you're using it for something as critical as a decision about accepting an offer at a new company? Well, you're going to want to watch for these red flags, that these aren't necessarily authentic reviews on Glassdoor. The first and the most obvious is that the reviews are way too good to be true. Yes, perhaps you have stumbled across a unicorn company that is a holy grail and oh my gosh, everyone should really want to work there. But when everyone only has positive things to say and no one has any criticism whatsoever, that tells me one of two things. First, the reviews aren't real, or second, freedom of thought is highly constricted in that company. Maybe it's a little bit of both. If every single review is glowing about every single aspect at that company and no one actually has any ideas on how the company can be better, this is actually, to me, a really big red flag. And if you came across that and you were my client, I would tell you to dig in the interview and ask some questions in order to suss that out. Another signal that the Glassdoor reviews have been either incentive or requested by the employer is that there is a high number of reviews in a short period of time. For example, what are the chances that everyone is logging on September 15th and writing a Glassdoor review? Just by chance. I can tell you it's probably about 0. You can also look at who is actually leaving reviews. Generally, you're going to be able to see the function. So if you find that it's a lot of people in recruiting and HR, there's a good chance that they are actually writing those reviews to make their jobs a little bit easier. Another thing that you can look at when you're reading Glassdoor reviews is if they're actually commenting on other reviews. Now, I've actually seen this multiple times on Glassdoor where you have a company receive a negative review and then there is one or more reactionary positive reviews. And some of them will even cite the negative review as, someone who's been burned by the company. If you think about it from an employee perspective, how much do you really care about your employer's reputation on Glassdoor? Unless you're dependent on it for hiring people, you probably don't care all that much. And you're not going to be personally offended and create a Glassdoor account in order to lash out at someone who left a negative review. These are the ones that make me suspicious that they were more incentivized or written by people at the company who are not supposed to be writing Glassdoor reviews, such as the owners and executive leaders at the company. And on that note, you can actually look for references to leaders actually caring about their Glassdoor reviews. This is something that I've seen when I have explored Glassdoor reviews with my clients, is where you find references to the fact that the employer really does care about their Glassdoor reviews. Now, finally, the other red flag that you need to look at, whether it's a positive review or a negative review, is read in the review if there is any context, such as if someone has just been terminated because the entire team was let go, they're not going to have a very good sentiment. And so it is going to be somewhat natural for them to log in and leave a very bad review. Another thing that I've seen, and another big red flag for you when you are evaluating Glassdoor reviews, and this especially applies to negative reviews, is I've even seen where employers have responded saying that it's a disgruntled employee. And that's kind of crazy, because even if someone was unfortunately let go, they should not be feeling such hatred towards their employer that they would go and create a Glassdoor account in order to leave a bad review. This tells me that the company does not treat people very well going out, and that is a great indicator of how they're going to treat you when you walk in the door. Not to say that it's not a disgruntled employee, but if you do see a pattern in the reviews, this is a strong indicator for you that this is something that you need to be critical of. When you do see any of these red flags, and especially if you're reading the Glassdoor reviews in preparation for an interview, bring those questions in and ask them, especially if you're meeting with team members. However, this isn't always going to be your most reliable resource to either refute or uphold positive or negative Glassdoor reviews. And that's why I recommend you take this next step when you have spotted red flags or you're suspicious about the Glassdoor reviews on the company's site. And that is to reach out to a former employee. Ideally, it's going to be someone within your direct network. However, if you know someone that is a second-degree connection on LinkedIn, connect with them and you can actually open up the conversation. Let them know that you're considering working with that employer and ask if they have any insights or advice that they would give you. Pretty much no job seeker actually does this, but in fairness, employers are doing reference checks on you. You should be doing reference checks on them as well, because the next step in your career is going to be an important one, and making the wrong step is going to get you back onto the job market far faster than what you actually intended. And especially in a competitive job market, sometimes the time to get hired isn't as fast as we necessarily want it to be, so we're not eager to go back there. Taking this step to make sure that you land in the right spot is going to help you avoid potential disaster. I did just mention that you should be formulating questions from the Glassdoor reviews in order to bring into the interview. And I highly recommend that you walk into every interview that you have with a list of questions. If you're struggling with this, I want you to go and check out this video right now so that you can make sure you're asking the right questions. If this video was helpful or informative, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, consider subscribing so that you get twice a week doses of the best career success advice online, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.